Da,
Look
da.
at Jimmy!
Da,
Hey,
da,
let me
da, da,
see
da,
you
da,
put
da,
your
da, da,
costume
da.
back on. Look, come on.
Alright, so here we are on Halloween talking about the final comparison of the month, and I've just got to say I am never doing anything again where I talk about 2 movies per day for any month. So, in each version of Piranha, and by the way, I'm not talking about the crappy 90s remake with Mila Kunis, I'm talking about the one from 2010, which some people would also argue is crappy, but I happen to like it. Anyway, in both of these movies, you've got a school of abnormal piranha fish which are swimming around and tearing people apart and eating them. And that's where the similarities end between these 2 movies. I tell you, they just keep getting more and more alike. Anyway, as is the case with the Godzilla comparison, I'm only going to be talking about the bare essentials of each version that they have in common, and that would be the people and the monsters. So, in the original, you've got this female investigator who is the lead character, and generally she's just a very likable and intelligent person, and she's also got some of the funniest scenes in the movie. Easily my favorite scene involving her is the one where she's distracting a military guard. Also, there's this guy she meets as she's investigating the disappearance of these 2 teenagers, and their sort of relationship starts off rocky at the beginning, but of course, you know that they're eventually going to bond over this tragedy that's taking place. And this guy is also a very likable character. He's a suitable hero for the movie, and he's also the father of this little girl who is the most sympathetic character in the movie. You know, she's going to this summer camp and she is absolutely terrified of swimming in the river, which of course isn't helped by the oncoming presence of these mutated piranha fish. And then aside from that, you've got some pretty awesome supporting characters played by pretty awesome actors like Kevin McCarthy, Barbara Steele, and Dick Miller. By the way, I'm sure you can already sense that this video is very rushed, and I do apologize for the fact that it's not quite up to par with some of the other videos from this month. I'm sorry that there wasn't as much thought put into it, but I've got plans for it tonight, and I'm just trying to get this out there as soon as possible. So anyway, in the remake, as far as the characters go, the lead character is this teenage boy who, you know, isn't entirely likable, but he's also not a complete asshole. He's just a fairly average American teenage boy. And, you know, his main story is that he's going on this boat trip with some fairly unlikable people. Even against the orders of his mother, he's supposed to be babysitting his baby sister, but he ends up going anyway because there's this girl he kind of likes who's also going, and pretty lady is pretty. And then on that boating trip, easily the most unlikable character in the movie is this guy who is driving the boat. He is just a complete douche. Really nothing redeemable or remotely likable about him. But I'm gonna go ahead and spoil it. His death scene in the movie is one of the best payoffs. And just like the original, this remake has a little girl in it who is the main character's little sister, and she's not quite as sympathetic as the one from the original because she's just a complete obnoxious pain in the ass, but at the same time, she is one of the funniest characters in the movie. And then another thing that shares in common with the original is a pretty solid supporting cast with Elizabeth Shue, Ving Rhames, and a really awesome cameo scene by Christopher Lloyd. Now, as for the piranha, in the original, the thing that makes them abnormal is that they are genetically mutated by military science or something like that. And they're also not the only creatures in the movie. As it's being discovered where these things came from, there are a couple of other pretty wild-looking sea creatures that appear in the scene. And of course, the special effects on these piranha are pretty low key, but they are able to use them to great effect. Like when you're seeing these little puppets dig at people's skin, it is just enough to get the scenes across. And honestly, though, some of the most intense scenes in the movie are the ones where you can't really see them. Like there's this one bit that takes place underwater where you just see the reaction on a scuba diver's face. That was actually one of the scariest scenes in the movie. And then there's another pretty effective scene involving a man who's, sacrificing himself to save a little boy. With the remake, the piranha are actually prehistoric monsters, which is about as cheesy as their premise in the original. And of course, in this version, they use CGI all the way, which actually looks decent in parts. There is one opening scene where it looks extremely cartoonish and like something out of a video game, but for the most part, I think it gets the job done. And also, the violence and bloodshed in this version is so much more brutal. Some of it doesn't even come from the piranhas themselves. Like, there's this one point where they start attacking these people at a spring break party, and a lot of the carnage just doesn't come from them, but just from people acting totally irresponsible and even dickish just out of plain fear. So in the end, I really like both of these movies, and they're both helmed by pretty solid directors. Like for the original, you've got Joe Dante of Gremlins fame. For the remake, you've got Alexander Aja, who also did that Hills Have Eyes remake I talked about earlier this month. Um, Both of them are pretty solid movies, in my opinion, even though a lot of people like to hate on the remake. The original does have more likable characters, and it does manage to become genuinely scary in parts, but I'm kind of leaning towards the remake on this one. I like how much funnier and campier it is, as well as the fact that, again, it's a lot more brutal. With a movie about man eating fish, you can't really ask for much more. So, those are my thoughts for this comparison. I hope you all have a happy Halloween.